Let's go.
Welcome to the SOULFAM Podcast, where we expand your personal universe. I'm Diana Marquetta, and in each episode, SOULFAM co-founder, co-creator Lexi Solden and I interview the world's most rising and longtime experts in consciousness, spirituality, entertainment, healing, and science. From Earth's dimensions and dimensions way, way beyond. On the SOULFAM Podcast, our frequencies are high and your heart chakras will open as these powerful voices of today share cutting-edge research, profound experiences, and valuable knowledge for your world in this out-of-this-world, thought-provoking, envelope-pushing interviews that could only take place right here on the SOULFAM Podcast.
Welcome back to the SOULFAM Podcast, Naha.
Oh my goodness, thanks for having me back.
We're so excited to have you back. It's obviously weird times, which we're not going to get into specifically, but I always sort of feel like you're somebody who always reminds me of a Jedi. You're like the Obi-Wan Kenobi in my world. So when things are weird, I sort of want a fireside chat with like a hermit in a long cloak, you know? So
oh yeah,
just some wisdom. And we know that you've had a lot of developments at 22 lately. I think the last time we had you on, your AM Lodge had just started a gigantic magical working called the Shem Hamefarash. And that has been completed. You're at the tail end of the Mazalot workings, which I understand a little bit less than the Shem working. And recently you mentioned that there's going to be a possible return to the Egyptian pantheon, which sounded really exciting. And we just wondered if you could talk about some of the fun developments over at your school.
Oh my goodness, I'd love to. Yes. Well, to the weird times in the world, I really feel it's always weird. The world is weird and times are weird, and we're always in a state where there's things that we're contending with, and they might be a little bit more of something that's affecting people on a broader scale, a more global thing. Sometimes they're more localized, sometimes there's community, but we also have our own personal universes that we exist in. So all times are weird. I can't imagine whenever anything is just, as my mom likes to say, hunky-dory. So there's always things and opportunities for us to be able to really focus prayer and light and healing into the areas of the world that need it. And so that's one of the beautiful things about the lodge that you're mentioning. So just for any of your listeners that don't understand what that is, at the School 22 Teachings, which is just a magical academy, if you will, that is set up basically like a magical college with courses and semesters and prerequisites and study halls and all of the things that you would expect in that kind of a setting. There's also an inner group, if you will. The lodge is a place to actually be able to practice all of the things that you learn. So you can go to class to study and get all of the information, but then to actually put it into practice and to do it together with other people. It's like the active magical community of the school. And we do these really powerful group workings, as we were just talking about, Diana, talking about consistency and commitment to things and the results that pay off when you do commit and not just try something for a little while and then walk away from it. And that's what I see in these workings. So Lexi, as you mentioned, the 72 part working of the Shem HaMephorash, really a deep dive exploring all of these different parts of what are the 72 names of God. Now we're doing the hexad workings, the workings of the mazalot, Hebrew word for the zodiac, the crown of stars. And one of the things that we're doing in that is we're doing invocations of all of the zodiacal archangels, which I've never really explored before. There's so many different components of magic and so many correspondences. And I've studied the planets and I've studied and worked with angelic invocation, but I had never done specifically an invocation of the zodiacal archangels. And those are the kinds of things that I feel I really cannot learn from a book. It'd be like trying to learn from a book, what is my higher power, or anything that is beyond the physical, the metaphysical realm. While books for me personally are good to learn correspondences and good to learn history and even to read about other people's experiences, when it comes to what things really are in the realms of the unseen, there's no better way for me to learn about it than just to call it forth or to go to that place astrally in meditation or in ritual, stand in front of it and go, what are you? Who are you? What can you teach me? What can you show me? What is this? So that's what we're doing right now. And then, as you were mentioning, the Egyptian pantheon. So we took a trip to Egypt a year ago, the students and I, and we did 5 initiations along the way. And those initiations relate to something called the powers of the Sphinx. This is something that it's not only something that people who have a magical practice will recognize, but it's something that you'll see also throughout art. It's been referenced in films and different places. So the powers of the Sphinx: to know, to dare, to will, and to keep silent. If anybody's seen the Jodorowsky movie Holy Mountain, you'll recognize the scene where these things are stated. And they correspond to 4 aspects of the human constitution. So they go along with the different elements, to will, to put your power into something, to know, obviously, to be aware and to have the powers of observation, to dare, to even have the sense of courage to push forth into something, and then to keep silent, which is one of the most magical, I would say, of the 4, because it's the idea of the sub rosa, the power in secrecy, the power in hermeticism, and understanding that not everything needs to be verbalized. And then we added a 5th power, which is to make sacred. And so it's kind of a culmination of when you do the first 4, you can put that together into a spiritual unity. So in a nutshell, that's what we've been doing and what we're getting ready to do. We still have 3 more of the zodiacal hexads that we're going to be that are forthcoming. And then we'll be doing the Egyptian initiations in December. There's 5 Saturdays in December. And we will see what the new year brings for the lodge. But we have all kinds of plans for workings that will happen. And people are welcome to come and join in at any point along the way. But usually what happens is we have a big influx whenever we start a new one. So I know at the beginning of December, we'll have a lot of people that show up, and to make a 5-week commitment is a lot easier than to make a 72-week commitment. So, it is a good time to be able to get in and do some really effective working. And just one last thing I want to say is, to where you kind of began with some of the current events that are going on, one of the things that we are able to do as a magical group is to really focus the light into the world. It's not just about what we're doing for ourselves, but as a collective, to be able to pray together, to make offerings together, and to anchor light into the world together. I definitely feel that it's more effective when it's done in that way than just as a solo practitioner.
What are some of the ways you're doing that? What's the ritual around that? And because I'm curious if other people would like to do it too, if whether they're practicing magic or not.
I love that you ask that, because it's very interesting that many people have been actually reaching out lately going, is there a particular time or a particular way that I could contribute to that? So yes. So the lodge, which I will say is just about, in February, it'll be wrapping up its 7th year. So it's got some legs under it. And whenever you have a magical group, it creates something that's called an egregore. And an egregore is like a living tradition. And it kind of creates almost like a consciousness of its own. When you have a lot of people that are putting energy into the same thing, that whatever that thing is, it builds. Even if it's just a symbol, you can think like a symbol in and of itself doesn't necessarily have any innate meaning, but if it's assigned meaning and enough people focus towards that, then that becomes like a Christian cross is a perfect example. Without the context of Christianity, it just looks like a lowercase letter T. But understanding that it is a symbol that so many people have put their faith and belief into, it empowers that, and then it has an effect. So seeing that or having that around, or, wearing a cross around your neck, it taps you into that egregore and into that energy. So the lodge has its particular egregore, and then it taps into something much larger of the tradition that we are a part of. And so after we've done our opening rituals, this is something because we have both people online and people in person, but we visualize that everybody collectively is sitting in a circle. So it doesn't matter if they're literally sitting right on my left and right side. I picture that everybody, and we all do it collectively, that everyone's sitting in the circle. We call a channel of light right down in the center, and everybody puts their prayers towards the center of the circle. And those prayers are whatever each individual wants to bring forward. And then collectively, with our will and intention, we support all of the prayers that have been set forth to send those up that column of light. So that's one of the ways that we do it. And anybody at any time is welcome to sit in conjunction with that. If you are thinking on a Saturday, and this is happening, right, I would say that the prayer is right around 11:30 Pacific time. But anyone is welcome at any time to either tune in actually to the lodge, because it is open at this point in time to anybody who'd want to attend. It's by donation. There's no barrier of entry. But even if you were not able to be there physically or on Zoom, if you wish to contribute your prayers and light and intention to that, I invite anyone to be welcome to do so. And it's part of the way that just becomes stronger for everyone. And the egregore also serves as a protection, I will say, for the group. And there's something really comforting in that as well, that we can feel safe to be able to practice magic the way that we do. I've definitely come into a lot of awareness recently of the privilege that I have living in the United States, living in Los Angeles, where I don't have to worry about the persecution of my beliefs. And even in other places in the world where it seems like it's a, free democratic nation, there is still a lot of social concern and still a lot of restrictions on how openly you can call yourself a magical practitioner. So I have such deep gratitude for even being able to come on a podcast and say that without, putting myself at some kind of risk. It's the times we live in, but it's also, other factors as well.
And I'm sorry, say that again. When is it? Is it on Saturday? Is it what date? Just
It's every Saturday. Yeah, we it's from 11 to 1 every Saturday Pacific time. But it's usually right around 11:30 that we get to the point where we're doing the prayer. So anytime in that window is when we're doing that work, though. But yeah, every Saturday 11. Once in a while we don't meet for the lodge, but it's only a couple times a year that we don't do it. And then for the first time ever coming up, in just a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in New York, and we're going to be hosting the lodge from New York. So that's exciting.
I hope we can talk more about that, because I think you are also bringing the middle pillar ritual. Is that right? Are you doing middle pillar in New York as well? Okay, cool. So we want to talk a little more about that, exactly what time and when and where it is. I was just going to ask if you could speak a little bit to the importance of balance in the life of a magical practitioner, because what you do is really cool. Your lodge is really cool. Everything is cool. I mean, I was always very excited about the wands and the swords and the incense sensors. It is really cool. And sometimes when people ask me what it is I do, I say I study, I take notes, I pray, I work on myself, and I really work on being a balanced person. And the response is like, oh, like that sounds kind of boring. Like it's not boring, and it's not easy either. It's really, really hard. Just for you, and maybe just for me, because I kind of separate my earth body self from my magical self. What are some tools that you use to stay balanced if you happen to be experiencing some kind of rocky energy?
Okay, well, I think that there's two things that I want to address here, and I will answer your question about the balance. But I think that also the response, it is something really, and I love the way that you answer this question. I study, I work on myself. What you are basically saying is, in a nutshell, what the number one objective of a mystery school is, which is know thyself. And I think that as humans, we obviously all have desires and urges, and we want something. We want answers. We want stimulation. We want things that are going to help us to feel good. We want to be entertained. And that I think goes along with the idea of being stimulated. So with that and what it is that people might be looking for, and I think that this is definitely a shared, just like a shared human quality, that we have senses for a reason, so we want to enjoy life through those senses. But in any place where we're going to try to fulfill something, well, we can have a momentary great, we can have a great experience, we can have something that enjoys us, but that we enjoy, but that is not the same thing as having true fulfillment and having something that's linked to a purpose, and have something that doesn't just leave us feeling empty once it's gone, So part of the magical path is about recognizing that the true joy, the true fulfillment, the actual power, the even the other aspects, the entertainment aspect, the stimulation, that we can find that within the self. And to the person who says, oh, well, study, know thyself. I mean, this sounds boring. I don't think it's as much of a sense of that it is actually like, oh, well, that doesn't sound so magical, is that people don't even understand or realize the incredible depths that we all contain. And it's not their fault. Everybody has been numbed, has been shouldered with guilt, has been told all kinds of bullshit from all kinds of angles. And we've been made to feel that we're much, much less than we actually are, and much less than we're truly capable of. And so I think that there's something in that people might feel like, oh, what if I look inside myself and I don't find anything? There's nothing there. I don't know. Like I need something I need the fireworks to go off externally for me to feel that I'm alive, right? But there are fireworks in here. Let me tell you. I mean, and it's something so much honestly realer in the sense that you keep it. It's not just momentary. It's something that's cumulative. It's something that builds. So maybe this does link with your question about finding balance, because balance is really about recognizing in my very, very core of cores what I truly do have power over, what is actually mine, and what isn't. What is just the external noise or projection? I think that having balance, the first part of that, you can think like, well, I got all the different things that I'm balancing. I got my work, and I got my relationships, and I got my brain and my heart, and they always need to be balanced. And I got to manage my time. Well, that sounds like a lot, but what if we focus just on the very center, like the fulcrum of the balance, that very, very middle point, not all the things that are stacked up on either side of it. And that middle point, that's our own point of orientation, our own core, our own very center. And that is like the deepest, most profound, most all-encompassing portal into our own truth, I think. And for just a million different reasons, I think that people are, I don't know if they're afraid to go there. I think that part of it is fear, but I think that, like I said a minute ago, it's more about fear of not finding anything than fear of what somebody might find, probably a combination of both of those things. But there's an opportunity there to work through whatever you find, to transmute whatever you find, and to really get into things that actually really, really matter. I will say, as far as keeping myself just in a place of feeling stable through where I am now, it really does come down to the fact of how just recognizing how many things that I have endured, and the faith that provides me with. And faith, I think, is one of the hugest components in just having balance, because you're trusting that you are going to be able to get through whatever can feel turbulent. So that's a huge part of it. And then just in terms of practical matters, it's no mystery, it's no secret of mine that I am in recovery as a alcoholic and an addict. And I've got, let's see, I'm going to be getting 14 years of sobriety on November 24th. Wow. So that's coming up pretty soon.
Happy birthday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And with that, just because I don't drink alcohol or take drugs at this point in my life, doesn't mean that I don't have an addictive personality. And so being in balance means keeping that in check, and really the school actually hosts a recovery meeting every other week. So I go to that, and that's very, very helpful to be tapped into that kind of a community. But also, again, as part of that self-knowledge, I know that to be part of how I'm wired. And so I have to give myself activities to get addicted to that are going to be healthy things. Like this year I'm addicted, and last year too, I was probably doing this last time I talked to you. I go to the sauna. I used to go the infrared sauna. I used to go once a week. Now I go twice a week. And it is a huge part of what just brings me sanity as a person in the world. I mean, you don't have to be a magician to go sweat it out. And I go in and I just let all of the things that I'm carrying melt out with that. And it's so detoxifying. So I can't recommend that enough. That infrared sauna is a really, that's one of my personal self-care things that I do. And that really helps. And it also is, part of balance is just having some like a consistent schedule as well. When I got a million different things going on at the time, when I know, all right, every Monday and Friday at 9 a.m., I know where I'm going to be. So it gives me a little bookend to the week to be able to balance all the stuff in between.
I don't know if we want to talk about it now or when we talk more about the New York events, but one of the rituals you are bringing to New York is the middle pillar ritual, which feels very balancing. I know there's a lot to talk about there, but is that something people can read about or do on their own? Should they learn? Should they do it with a group? I always feel better doing magic with a group because I'm afraid of things that go bump in the night. So I always like doing magic with a group, including when it's middle pillar. Just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about middle pillar in general.
Yeah, I'd love to. That's such a focal point of my work and my practice, because middle pillar is the one thing. Well, there's two things that cross over between my practice where I see clients and my practice as a teacher. And so I do tarot readings for clients one-on-one, and I also teach the tarot. And then middle pillar is a magical ritual that I lead as a group ritual once a month, but then I also do it on a one-on-one basis with people. And it's one of the first magical rituals I ever learned. So when I started learning ritual magic, it was interesting because I didn't really have an interest in learning about magic. I kind of just fell into it. And I think I probably talked a little bit about that last time, but I didn't go from not knowing about magic to sort of trying a bunch of different things and learning the different steps along the way. I just went straight into, these are traditional Hermetic Kabbalistic rituals, and this is how it's done. This is how it's been done for hundreds of years. So there was no real testing ground for me. It was just going straight to formal ceremonial magic. And so after learning the initial ritual, which is the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the second ritual that I was taught was the middle pillar. And all of those components that I mentioned before, the powers of the Sphinx, to know, to where, to will, to dare, and to keep silent, that fourfold nature put together with the spiritual, the fifth component, the spirit, is something that we see throughout all of these different rituals. It's like it's a holistic program to get all of these components working together. And if we want to look to the roots of that, we can go back really as far as Plato, or then even to Neoplatonism, where things were really laid out as having their correspondences, whether it be externally in the world as elements, whether they be internally as different dispositions or characteristics of humanity. So to be able to break things down into these components and then to line them up in a pillar is to say, it's very similar to what in the East they would call the chakra system, where you've got all of these different wheels of energy, which are placed in a line, and one kind of flows into the other, and you want to holistically address the whole system. So middle pillars, I think that you could say that the thing that, if for someone who's never heard of it, the closest correlation that you might understand would be the chakra system, where you've got not so much wheels. I don't think of in the middle pillar those things as wheels of energy, as I think of them as openings, as portals into the different parts of the self. So into the mind, into the emotional body, into the energetic body, into the physical body. And by doing the ritual, you're lining everything up on that middle line. You are balancing all of those things. And it's a combination of visualization, where you're picturing light at different points in your body, and intonation, where you're vibrating very specific sacred names, which in turn, working with the visualization and then the sound, you're creating a particular resonance which brings those things into harmony. And that, I think, Lexi, that's to the things that you said that you enjoy, the incense and the magical tools. And while we might think of those as physical things, we got to remember that, first of all, the body, this is our first and most important magical tool. But again, you're speaking about, you like those things because they give you, there's like a sense of what they have. There's a stimulation of like, ooh, these magical implements. But smell, sound, it's not just what we see. It's also the vibrations that we hear, and incense is used across magical ritual in all traditions, in all times, because it evokes a particular state. It puts us into, it alters our consciousness. It puts us into a particular place. It's linked to memory, so it can link us to very ancient internal memory. It can link us to sacred places that we've been before. So remembering that those two components of inner vision or visualization, and then also what we're taking in and what we're smelling, that those two magical tools of themselves can really create a lot. So those are the two main components that we use in middle pillar, and it is something that is, definitely able to be learned. You can read, there's an amazing book called The Middle Pillar by Israel Regardie that is kind of the textbook of the practice. But I will say, as a teacher, I really believe that when you are learning magic, and I only say this as an echo of what every magical author that I respect and who has been the most fundamental in my education says, which is that if you want to learn ceremonial magic, you've got to find a good teacher. You can get far. I would guess that you can get to a certain point through books, but at some point to actually really receive, to be passed down a spark that is something that comes from mouth to ear, is a matter of having a teacher. And this is something you see in other traditions too, right? It's like Reiki, for instance. To become a Reiki master, you have to have a Reiki master. You can't just have a book on Reiki mastery. So it's something that's passed down. It's passed down as an attunement. And I think that's the best way to learn, whether it be middle pillar or anything that is having to do with ceremonial magic.
I think we lost Lexi's visual there.
Oh, you can't see me? Am I here?
No.
No? All right, I'll turn.
And she's gone up in a puff of smoke, folks.
Right. Continue.
Can still hear you, though.
So I was curious.
Please
I've
continue.
only done the middle pillar once, and I did it online. It was probably like 2 years ago, maybe even 3, before you and I connected, and Lexi had probably just started to attend the school. But my sense also was that it's about connecting with all of the elements and bringing all of that sort of universe into connection with myself.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the basis of the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, to recognize that although life can feel overwhelming and the universe is truly, when you stop to think about how much it contains, you can't even wrap your brain around any of that. That's something ever expanding. So to break that down into some kind of way that we can look at least on the terrestrial plane, and to do that elementally, like I said, this goes back to, we can find the roots of it in Neoplatonism, but to say, okay, we can have an understanding of the elements, fire, water, air, and earth. We look around us, those are the components of nature. And there's sky, there's soil, there's the sea. Those are like the literal air and earth and water. There's the sun, fire, right? So they have an analog within us. They have a counterbalance within us, our own interior fire, our own interior water. We can even think of that in a physical sense. We can think of the air component, like our synapses in our brain. We can think of water as the actual blood running through us, and earth as our bones, and fire as our electrical impulse in our circulatory system. But we can also take that one step further, and we can think of what that flows into, that the synapses flow into our thoughts, our thinking, our projections, and our the blood that flows through us, connected to the heart, flows into our feelings and our emotions and how we bond. So the deeper that we want to go, the deeper we can kind of realize that we can use that same model, expand it out as big as we want, or look at it as microscopically as we want. And if we can use our own physical self, as I think to what Lexi was saying, and we can study ourselves, then in turn, we can look back externally again and go, maybe I can make a little bit more sense of the world around me and kind of see how things work together. What elements actually work together in allyship? What ones are opposed to each other? What, just like magnets, what attracts and what repels. So it's kind of you kind of work both ways. You study yourself, you look externally to see, does where my mind is leading me, does this make sense? Do I see the evidence in the things around me? Do I feel the resonance within? And then you can continue to build on that idea. So yeah, I think that the middle pillar has been the most useful ritual that I have. I mean, the two that I mentioned, and from there, there's just been so many other things that I I would say it's not necessarily getting more elaborate. What I find the longer that I go on the magical path is that it is the stripped down versions of the rituals that I find even more effective. And so that comes down to just looking at individual elements, looking at breath work, and of course, under the element of air, and just being able, I do my breath work exercises. I don't do them every day, but I do them at least a few times a week. And that is extremely necessary just for my mental balance, for my mental clarity, and being able to have the practices that I can kind of zero in on those individual things. And if I have myself in balance, then the stuff that I need, the things that I want to make happen, the things I'm trying to attract into my life, I have a much better way of just letting that, like trusting the universe that stuff's going to come as it's meant to come, instead of feeling like I have to put a ton of energy into making it happen.
So when you go to New York, you're going to be teaching that. And what else did you mention?
So the lodge and the middle pillar. And it's so funny how that all happened. I have my best girlfriend, her name's Tara. She lives in Phoenix, and her and I have been friends since we were teenagers. We lived in Seattle together, and we were kind of hellions together. She's an incredible artist. Her and I have actually made 2 different tarot decks together. We've collaborated on many different projects, and she is a really, really prolific artist in Phoenix. And it's her birthday, and it's kind of like a big milestone birthday. So we decided to go out to New York. This is the kind of friend that, I never really know what's going on as far as art, museums, I know some of the classics, but she is has her finger on the pulse, as they say, of all of the current artists, and especially in the underground. And so I always know that when I spend time with her, she'll be taking me to see some really amazing things. We'll go to some galleries. We'll see some stuff like that. And while we're out there, her birthday happens to fall on the 17th. She's a Scorpio. And the lodge is on the 18th, and middle pillar is on the 18th. Now, as I said, lodge is every Saturday. And the only things that would bump the lodge where we wouldn't have it would be 2 times a year, I teach Magic Fundamentals, which is a big weekend intensive that I teach. It comes up in January. So when we do that, that intensive is from 10 in the morning till 7:30 at night. So we don't do the lodge and that. There's a few other events that we might, but middle pillar, unlike the lodge, which is in its 7th year, I have been teaching middle pillar every single month since 2010. So it's in its 13th year. And in 13 years, I'm very proud to say I've never missed a month. I've never canceled it. I've never not done it. Every month we've done it. And even in my travels, when we were in Egypt, we did Middle Pillar in Egypt. We did it live from the Nile. So the show must go on. And as I was looking at this, I'm going, okay, your birthday's the 17th. Can I fly back to LA? Because I have to I can't not do it. And I just realized I'm just going to have to do it in New York. I did it in Egypt. That once you've done that, it's kind of like anything else becomes possible. So I rented a couple really incredible venues, and I actually have quite a few students in New York, thanks to the pandemic, and people that also live in the surrounding areas, people in New Jersey. And I actually have found that there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to also fly in for it that maybe live on the East Coast or in that area. Cool. So we're going to do the lodge. It will still be at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So it's going to be 2 p.m. Eastern time. I didn't want to switch things up for my LA people. So we'll be doing the lodge in the afternoon in New York. And then that's going to be in Brooklyn. And then in the evening, we'll do Middle Pillar. And we're going to expand it out a little bit. I've got the place for over 3 hours. So I think we'll have time to do a little wizard mingling and just kind of hang out as well as do the ritual together. So I'm excited to do that and kind of get up out of my comfort zone, meet some people on the other side of the country. And I'm hoping that there's going to be some people, a lot of people don't like to do online stuff. They want to do it in person. And so I hope there's some people that maybe have been waiting for the opportunity to do something in person. We got to get everyone out of their hermitude so that they'll come and do that. But yeah, that comes up. That's coming up quick. So November 18th. And that's when we'll be in New York. Tickets are still on sale as of right now. So I'm hoping to sell out both of those events, but there's still time to get into that. And yeah, it's just, it goes back to the faith aspect. As I was mentioning, I could be in a place going, oh no, there's no way. How am I gonna, I've got how do I balance it? How do I be there for my friend? Of course, I can't miss her birthday. And then at the same time, how do I be there for my students and what they're expecting me to be showing up for? And the way opens when you're in a place where you're operating not in the too much everything has to be the way I expect it to be, and this has to be where I need it to be, but just to go with it. And I will tell you, as soon as I just went with it, I went online, I looked for places to rent, and I just didn't hesitate too long. This life is short, and if we sit and we hem and haw about should I do this or shouldn't I, maybe when I was younger, I think not when I was super young, when I was much more reckless, but I feel like in my 30s I did a lot more hemming and hawing about thinking I needed to make all the right decisions. And now in my 40s, I feel much more, there's a part of me that almost feels like, I'm 48 now, I feel almost like I'm already in the bonus round of life, where at this point in time, I'm ready to just go for it again and kind of reclaim that attitude that I had when I was younger, but maybe in a less careless way and in a more intentional way. But what failure would mean to me now is a lot different than it did in my 30s, where in my 30s I felt like a failure would like destroy my whole life and I'd have to go back to square one, like go back to college, figure everything out. And now I feel if I make a misstep, just on to the next day, a new opportunity, something else to be take it as a learning experience and keep pushing forward, you know?
So you're going to be in Brooklyn at 2:00 on November 18th. And what's the location?
Well, the location is Sub Rosa. That's not the name of it. I'm actually not giving the address out,
cool.
Except to ticket holders.
Exciting.
So I will say it's in Bushwick. Talk about a throwback from back in the day. I remember being a teenager in my early 20s going to warehouse parties where you didn't have the address on the flyer. You had to call the hotline and go to the map point and maybe get on a shuttle bus, and you just ended up there. So, I mean, we're not going through all those hoops, but there's something to be said for, you know, I will say, like, in this, some of the things that we've been doing, and this goes back to what I mentioned earlier about how fortunate I feel that I even can practice magic. But I was traveling earlier this year in some places and in some countries where that just was not the case. And I think that people were almost shocked that I was just so willing to talk about my practice. And I'm talking two other magical practitioners, to other hermeticists. And they're kind of looking at me like, wow, you're very forthcoming with what you do. And I think about the school and even the lodge, as I said, anyone's welcome to come. I do feel that we're protected by the egregore, but it had me thinking, to be in a place where I have the school and I can practice openly, I can't lose sight of the fact that there is still value in having some secrets be secret. Even some of the classes that we've had over some of the more advanced classes we've done this year. I taught a Hermetic Kabbalah level 3 class where these were only to students that had been studying with me for quite some time. And we kept the training of that class very private. I asked people, don't post pictures of it. Don't share the sigils that we created. And even the work we're doing in the lodge right now, even though it's open, we have these incredible talismans that we've made for each of the zodiac signs. They're so beautiful. But I've asked people, don't share it, don't post it. They're so cool. I know I could post these talismans on Instagram and double the amount of people that are coming to the lodge. But that's not the point. The point is keep sacred things sacred. And is the time going to come when I share those talismans? Sure. But right now, I'm trying to charge them up. And there is value in just keeping some things just for the people that are there and showing up. So yes, to the address. I'm not giving the addresses out, but the first event will be in Bushwick. They're both in Brooklyn.
Okay, cool.
The second one is also in Brooklyn, kind of near it's near a part of town that's where the Navy Yard is.
Oh, cool.
So yes, that's what's coming up. And then January is always a busy season at the school. We'll have all kinds of things. As I said, Magic Fundamentals will be coming up again. I'll be teaching tarot, which is one of the most popular courses. So tarot starts in January. We're also going to be doing some year-long commitments that are going to start in January. This year, I feel a lot is really going to gel, as if it hasn't already. But bringing in, I've got some new staff members that are coming in to assist. We're building out our online store. There's books that we're working on publishing, and we've got new exciting changes to our faculty. So it's a really, really exciting time.
Good,
A lot on the horizon.
good time to go to mystery school.
Yeah. How can people
Yes.
find
Sure.
you, Naha?
Yes, it definitely is. If it's always a weird time in the world, it's also always a good time to learn. And it's a matter of divine timing, because there's going to be times when we don't have extra time to go to class, or we don't have the finances to do it. But if it's meant to be, that's what we say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right?
Lexi, do you want to ask about a couple of things that you're much more familiar with than I am, that we talked about kind of early before this started?
Was I trying to get Naha to speak about her thoughts on the term gray magic? Is that what it was? Or were we talking about magical death?
Yeah, I wonder if we lost her completely. Okay, so we were talking about a couple of different things, and I don't know that this is anything to necessarily address in the podcast, but there was some questions that I'll bring up how this came about. But I see a lot on Instagram now about spell casting and just stuff, right? That I'm like, what does that really mean? Is that and Lex, that kind of inspired a little conversation about the term gray magic, which I don't understand what that is. I don't understand a lot of this, but I'm super curious.
Yeah, there's with anything that is a particular personal spiritual practice, there is such a large umbrella there. Think about an umbrella as large as religion and how many things fall under that, and what that can, you could ask one person about what is religion to you. The answer to that question is diverse as the amount of people you asked, right? And magic is like that. Magic is such a large category that all of the things that fall under it, you can say there's white magic, black magic, gray magic, good magic, evil magic, high magic, low magic. There's so many different parts of that. And there's witchcraft, there's voodoo, there's practices that are more spiritual or less spiritual. The practices that that are a part of what I do is Hermetic magic and Kabbalistic magic. So those are not practices that are about spell working. I even feel like, here's another example. If you think about exercise, there's exercise that is going to the gym, and there's exercise that's doing yoga, where yoga is going to overlap with a spiritual practice, where going to the gym isn't necessarily going to be that. Although I will say, when I used to go to the gym with my friend Tara back in Seattle, we used to see these guys, they had weight belts on, like the big super buff guys, and their weight belt said, sweating for Jesus on it. Right. So I don't know, maybe that life was spiritual for them. But my point is that people get into magic for all different kinds of reasons. And the idea of doing spells is kind of in that category that I was talking about earlier, of reaching out for something externally from yourself because you want that because there's something that you're looking for. So why would you do a spell? You do a spell for love, you do a spell for money. I mean, those are like the classic things. Do a spell to make your noisy neighbors shut up. And it's all of these kind of aspects of getting something externally, or maybe shifting the external reality. And while that might be a thing, and obviously it is a thing for a lot of people, I personally find that for myself that would be disempowering. If there's something that I am supposed to have, if there's If I want to have greater abundance in my life, then I'm going to think about what am I doing that even makes me worthy to be abundant. I'm going to work upon myself. I'm going to invoke those kind of aspects internally instead of trying to draw something through some kind of external means. And in terms of anything that would interfere with someone else's free will, that just sounds like manipulation to me under the guise of magic. And I think of it almost as, I think that it's, spell work is closer to me to like stage magic than it is to true ceremonial magic, where you're sort of conjuring something up, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily going to leave you with any kind of, it might just leave you with a bigger mess than you
Right.
started with.
Who knows what you're going to get?
So yeah, there's a very classic story about the guy who wanted to do a money spell, and he wanted to manifest $10,000. So he put all of his energy into looking up how to do a money spell, and he said, oh, take a blank check and write $10,000 and write it to yourself and put it in your wallet and focus on it completely and call it in and call the gods to bring you $10,000 and just keep focusing on this. And, you know, these ideas of creative visualization, that's call it the secret, you know, that's a common thing. It may not even be considered spell casting. Right. So then the guy's uncle dies and leaves him $10,000.
Interesting.
And so the moral of this story is not well, the reflecting on this story is not to say, did this guy kill his uncle? He got the $10,000, but at what cost?
Right.
And this is no judgment on anybody who does this kind of thing. But if you're trying to fill a hole for something that you don't have, here's one of the tricks of it. Spells work. When Lexi was saying, well, I study and I continue to show up and I work upon myself and I do these rituals over and over again, it takes time. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It's an over time being cumulative. You see the change, you see the shift, and guess what? It sticks. It's not just easy come, easy go. Because you know what? That guy gets the $10,000 6 months later, that money's gone. And he's not bringing his uncle back. And the thing is not whether or not the spell killed his uncle, because that sounds like superstition, right? Could be a total coincidence. The issue here is that he's going to live the rest of his life not knowing and wondering and under the mantle of guilt of, oh shit, what if what I did caused that to happen? Right. And that is the real black magic, which happens in the brain when we get caught on a thought and then it undoes us. And then who knows? That guy dives into a deep depression. He lives wrought with anxiety or fear or whatever, self-punishing, because he can't stop obsessing about that and thinking about if that happened. Was it worth it? Absolutely not. And even though that's kind of like that's sort of a fable to a certain degree, it's very easy to see how something that you get the result that you want, if it didn't come through actual having the merit, doing the work, earning the money, then that it creates a debt, and that it's pulled from somewhere. You can't just that money isn't just created out of thin air. Everything comes from somewhere. So that's, like I said, it's closer to stage magic. That magician is not just pulling the rabbit out of thin air. The rabbit was hiding somewhere. If you are doing a spell and manifesting something, you're not manifesting something that didn't already exist in the universe. You're pulling it from somewhere and you're putting it somewhere else. So it's like I say it's like using a magical credit card. You get the thing, I got the money, I got the love, I got this or I got that I wanted. Spells work. That's why they're popular. They're popular because they work. That's why you see them all over Instagram. That is not sub rosa magic. That is externally out in the world magic. But then later you're in debt and you got to pay that credit card back, and you got to pay it back with interest. And do you want to spend the rest of your life going, wow, now I'm just constantly trying to catch up with where I once was? You know, the most ironic thing to me ever is the person that sells a money spell online. It's like, if you had the power to actually do an effective money spell, why are you selling money spells? You see what I mean? Like, it makes zero sense if you really step back and think about it. And if it's done as an entertainment and as a novelty, I don't see any harm in it in that way, you know. And I think that it's kind of a gateway into doing real transformative, powerful magic. But it is kind of, it is something that can be dangerous. It can be disempowering, and it doesn't necessarily give a good name to the kind of practitioner that really is trying to do some deep inner self betterment, when it's like, oh, magicians, they're just all conjurers and snake oil peddlers. But with anything that you get a mixed bag, you know. Intention is so key, and I think that if you're doing whatever your practice is, however you are practicing magic, if you do have beneficial, positive intentions, that is a really, really important
aspect,
part of it all. And part of the one way that I know to do spell work and not leave yourself in magical debt is you have to give offerings, you have to give gratitude, you have to get ahead of the sacrifice, so things are not just taken from you. It can't just be what you ask for. It's what you give in return to repay that. And if you're wise enough and intentional enough, you can be a very powerful, practical, and safe spellcaster. But unfortunately, most people are not that educated and not that advanced to be able to do it in that way, where they're not leaving themselves some kind of negative debt.
Right.
But you know, we're all learning.
Well,
and I will say, I screwed up so many things in my life before I got to this point. So I had to make a lot of bad choices. And I still do, you know, nobody's perfect.
Well, Lexi and I were talking about what magical debt is, which I'm familiar with that term, but I find that really valuable right now, actually, because there's so much online about manifestation and magic and spells, and I see stuff like this all the time. And even from my own ancestral background, there's that in it. The Nordic women were really invested in some of that. So anywho, I find that super interesting, and it's probably putting things on their ear a little bit for those who aren't really familiar with how 22 teachings works, how your particular teachings work, and really what's involved in all that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's not what we are focusing on. It's much, much more a personal work upon the self. And I will say to those ancestral, those ancestral traditions, and I can't speak to the Nordic, but I know that in many of the older or ancient traditions that did this kind of like invocational spell work, that's why animals are sacrificed. When you see, I mean, even like going back to biblical times, and so there's a lot of traditions where there's been an animal sacrifice. Like in today, I mean, that's still done in certain traditions today, but there's also a certain aspect, like some people in modern times would be like, well, no, there's no way I would do that. But you got to recognize why that was done was to do the exchange. To, you're doing the sacrifice so that you can get something in return. That's the offering. And so that has to be what you're giving has to mean enough for what it is that you're calling in. You can't be like, well, we can all consider the things that we could choose to give up. People do that at Lent. They say, I'm going to give up, eating
chocolate.
I'm going to give up eating meat. I'm going to give up chocolate for a month or whatever that thing is. And it is an exchange to be able to have blessings come in. But when you're doing high magic, you're not pulling energy from one thing to put it somewhere else. You're drawing light down from the unmanifest. So you're bringing more light into the world instead of moving physical things or people from one place to another. So, well, Lexi, we've been getting into it.
Can you guys hear me or see me at all?
Oh,
now you can. Okay,
yeah,
so I fell into a portal for a while, but I could still hear you and see you guys. But you guys... I'm so glad to be back. This always happens to me. This was amazing, Naha. Thank you. And for people who are maybe not already looped in with you on social media, where can they find you? How can they get in touch?
Pretty much everything is through 22 Teachings. You can find everything about registering at the school at 22teachings.com. You can follow us on Instagram at 22 Teachings. We have a YouTube channel that's YouTube/22 Teachings. So we're pretty easy to track down in the outer realms.
Right. Okay. Wow. This was sort of a beautiful conversation, Naha. I have to tell you, I really appreciate it, and I feel shifted from it.
Wow. I'm glad, and I hope that people can take away from it. The one thing that I really want people to hope people take away from is that really the real magic, as maybe even kind of corny as it sounds, the truest magic is the magic that's within you. And to focus on that, to focus light within the self, and to discover how deep your interior cauldron, your inner well, your bloodline, all your creative depth, if you can really, really just open the veil a little bit to realize how deep that is, you will find so much more fulfillment than just thinking that you need something outside of yourself that's just gonna soothe you for the moment. That's where, as my teacher William would say, that's where you're gonna find the juice. It's within.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Naha. I do feel that the session with with Obi-Wan was transformative for me as well. And there's things that, I've learned from you, things that just concepts I've learned before that sometimes you forget. And so going back and sort of relearning some of these things with the listeners, it was really beautiful for me too. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm so glad. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you. And hopefully everybody will be at at both of your events in New York and Brooklyn.
Yes. We're going to have a great time.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop recording. Okay.
We'll stop recording. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the SOULFAM Podcast. Be sure to tune into every episode where we dive into a different rabbit hole of the known and unknown to empower you in conscious living and exploration of the greater universe. We hope you leave each episode with a little stardust in your hair and inspiration in your heart. With love from your SOULFAM.